This is episode 798 of Car Con Carne. Episode 800 will roll out on Monday the 12th, 9 a.m. It's 10 memorable moments from the long-running history of Car Con Carne. I'll get to tonight's guests in a second, but first I want to tell you about a book. I want to tell you about 90 Days in the 90s, written by Andy Fry. It's a book about going back in time. Haven't we all had moments where we thought, oh man, I wish I could go back and do X, Y, and Z. I wish I could go back and see that show at that place. I wish I could just relive that moment. Well, that's what Darby does, the character in 90 Days in the 90s. She is a Chicagoan. She owns a record store, and she goes back in time. She jumps on the gray line, which is like your standard CTA line, only this one goes back in time. And Darby goes back to the 90s in Chicago. Awesome book. I'm recording this on the 6th of December, which means the holidays are still a couple weeks away, which means this would be an awesome gift or a stocking stuffer for friend, family member, colleague, anyone interested in that period of time musically or just cool fiction in general. 90 Days in the 90s.com is where you can find it. You can also find it on Amazon. Chicago punk pioneers Sludgeworth are back. Kind of. The Losers of the Year compilation is being pressed on vinyl for the very first time. It's an exciting moment. And joining me to talk about that release and all things Sludgeworth, I have Dan, Adam, and Brian from the band. A year ago, I didn't think a conversation like this was even possible, but here we are talking about Sludgeworth at the end of 2022.
It's wild.
Yeah, who would have thought, right?
Let's start at the beginning. It's funny. I shared a picture that was in your press kit. I shared it to my Instagram. One of the first people to respond to it was Joe Principe of Rise Against. He said, "Oh yeah, that picture for sure was taken at McGregor's in Elmhurst." That was a moment. Like that place, you guys, that scene, influencing people like Joe of Rise Against, arguably one of the biggest bands in the world right now. Take me back to that period when Sludgeworth was active.
Yeah, we played that club quite a bit, probably more than any band I think really of in the Chicago area. And from what I remember, it was a cool place. It was a guy, his name Matt Nelson, used to book shows every Sunday, and it was a time where people were starting to notice punk rock, and but it wasn't mainstream yet. But it was kind of like Green Day hadn't broke or anything, like Offspring. We played with both of those bands.
Sure.
Yeah. I want to say even like Nirvana was pretty new at the time. So you had Nirvana, and then you had I think people kind of felt like the winds of the time were just kind of moving in somewhat of the punk direction, and so you had a lot of bands from that time that were coming through there. Like I said, we had played with Green Day, Offspring, Jawbreaker. They had come through. We were one of those bands that were just really into Naked Ray Gun and Jawbreaker and bands like that, and playing at that time. And so, we played there all the time.
A lot of people, when describing Sludgeworth, say that you guys have a Midwestern sound, and I agree with that. I don't know if I'm saying that because of that kind of Ray Gun-esque OOOs that I would hear on songs like Never Say Never or Someday. But there is something to the Midwestern notion. There's an earnestness, Dan, like a full-throated earnestness to the way you attack these songs that feels, I don't know, Midwest. Is that crazy?
It is. Yeah, I'm the Midwest thing. We were asked in an interview about, if how important the Midwest was. And I think it was, but we all responded the same way, which was we listened to music and were inspired from music from everywhere. I knew like we were, like for me, especially Naked Ray Gun were a pretty big deal, but, we were just kind of, inspired by everything. But, to come to think of it, yeah, there's probably a lot to be said for just being in the Midwest, just being a person from the Midwest versus, I think we're a different breed in the Midwest versus like the West Coast or the East Coast. You know,
I agree with that.
that's kind of just my opinion on it, but you know, I just think people in the Midwest are just typically built a little differently. Maybe
And
not built
it
differently.
also,
I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for, but
it's also the time, right? So there's no internet, so it's like it's kind of hard to hear bands from the West Coast, East Coast, and you're kind of forced to be, I don't want to say inspired or whatever, but by bands that are just around you, like that you have access to. It's a whole different
yeah,
world. You know what I mean?
Like you almost can't help
yeah,
it.
for sure.
No, you can't. And the music that you play is definitely gonna have that vibe. You can't shun it. You know what I mean? It's kind of in you because it's what you're exposed to.
I think, yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And like if you guys remember, like, you know, like Southern California had like had a vibe going, and you know, the East Coast, well, definitely New York City had like New York City, like hardcore and all that. Boston had like a hardcore scene from, you know, that they're all kind of influenced by each other. So I think it's like, you know, the Midwest definitely had that kind of thing going. Um, I think we were part of that, or definitely influenced by that. Um, but I agree with you guys. We kind of were like listening to all kinds of stuff, as well as, you know, being in part of that environment from that time, because we were, you know, that age, you know.
Yeah.
So, losers of the year, pressed to vinyl on Red Scare, first time ever on vinyl. Listening back to these songs, I think they hold up remarkably well. When you listen back to them, can you hear that, or do you hear a bunch of kids playing punk rock?
I think some of them hold up pretty well, and some of them kind of don't. But I think they're still good even when they don't. Like I'm happy basically. So if it's a good to me. It's a good accomplishment to be able to listen to them 30 years later and not like go, oh God, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? Because I definitely have records like that I've been a part of, where I go back and listen to them, and I'm like, you know, practically, you know, holding my nose listening to it. But that's definitely not one of them. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Well, how about you, Brian and Adam? And when you listen back to these songs, as you dug up some previously unreleased things for this, what do you hear when you hear Sludgeworth in 2022?
It's funny. Me and my son were actually listening to it in the car today, and as of late, like I've listened to it in the past, but never really gave it much thought. And as of late, probably given it a little more thought. And it's really like a timestamp. Like it's more than a time. It's like a time machine. It's like you want to go back to '92, throw that record on. I think that they hold up. I think that, it's funny. I cringe because there's things that I would have played differently or kept tempos in check or whatever. But that's kind of what made it punk. Um, but I think it's definitely withstood the test of time. Adam, I totally cut you off, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying you go ahead. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say yet. But yeah, I agree. Honestly, I feel like these are all really good, catchy songs, but I never understood the I don't know, some people's obsession with it, which I think is awesome and I love it. I'm happy that people love it that much, but I think it was most of our kind of just beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good.
What's funny about that obsession thing that you just kind of mentioned is it's funny because I've talked to so many people since the Red Scare release, and I was talking to this guy Christopher, and he's like, dude, he's like, you guys played You and I at the Cubby Bear for your first reunion show, and that's when I proposed to my wife. It's like everyone has these like stories about the song, these moments. It's kind of, it's kind of cool. It's like when you're playing them, you don't really think, you don't think about that stuff. But then when you like, oh wow, it's just kind of trippy.
Yeah, and I don't mean to downplay anyone's having meaning behind any of our songs or
why so
great
offensive, bro?
Life. I just felt like I was like, yeah, it's just our fun music, and then people have attached things to it because of the time in their lives, which is great.
That's super cool. That's got to make you feel amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that's kind of the point of like, when you make music or write songs, like you're trying to invoke a moment, if not in you and somebody else, right? So I guess we kind of succeeded unknowingly in that, right? Or maybe not.
So Dan and Brian, this was a side project from Screeching Weasel that became a front project, and then the band broke up in 1992. Last show was in 93. What happened? Was this just a bunch of young musicians with egos clashing? Was this just artistic differences? Why did Sludgeworth call it a day back then?
A fight? I think we still kind of disagree about it to this day. What? Actually, because we were just talking. Right. What's that?
I was saying we agree on this just so I could disagree with you.
Oh, I see. Well, no, well, maybe Brian and I disagree on it.
I was kidding.
Yeah, I thought see the music differences, but I did, and I think like there's just, I think when you're young, you kind of you start moving in different directions. I felt like, and I said this in an interview, I felt like I was kind of drifting away. And so like looking back now, I didn't realize it at the time that, or maybe I did, but like I really see it a lot clearer now that I'm older, that's what I was doing. I felt I felt like this something wasn't working. And I mean, I can remember getting in some arguments with you guys as well. And so, I felt like, I don't know, it's kind of a lot of things. There was issues like, I tend to like things that a lot of music that's pretty simple. Like my favorite, music, whether it's the Ramones or Hank Williams or Tom Petty or like an early Who song, it's usually I like a lot of stuff that is like 3 and 4 chords, and it seemed to me at that time that my bandmates kind of didn't. So there was a lot of that as well. I thought they had good points with it as well. You want to have dynamics, and I think that's what they were striving for back then. So those are some of the things.
I didn't expect this to feel I didn't expect this to feel as uncomfortable as it did, bringing it up just now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were just talking about it recently, and those guys had gone on and did a band, and I did other projects, and so I think there's always been a little weirdness with it. I'm just speaking frankly here, but I mean, I still love these guys, and had a pretty amazing experience at the same time. So it's both. It doesn't fit into one easy category.
Right. What's funny is that it's funny because 30 years later, we're still trying to answer the question of why we broke up. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And because, and believe me, so it's been haunting me, I guess, technically for 30 years, because it's like, yeah, we were all young and we were kind of going we wanted to try new stuff. We wanted to experiment. And I understand, and I get Dan's point. The thing is, I didn't get Dan's point until much, much later, but like, and part of my fear at the time was when I was in Screeching Weasel was more hardcore. You know what I mean? It was faster. It was more like
you're talking early on.
I'm talking early,
like
yeah.
Back in your, yeah.
When I was in Weasel, and
right.
And then it changed to like the 3-chord, you know, kind of more Ramonesy stuff, and I wasn't interested in that. And maybe I think, and then with Sludgeworth, I was there was dynamic, and that was exciting. And then going back to maybe 3-chord is maybe what gave me the heebie-jeebies, or whatever. I don't know, but it just sucks to still even be thinking about it 30 years later as to why.
Yeah, no, well, and that's the thing is I can remember bringing a lot of song ideas, you know, to practice. I'm like, I don't know, it's a little too simple, or it's the same drum beat. And I'm like, shit, I'm never going to be able to write a song with these guys. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, that makes
so because like that, to this day, that's still how I write songs. 30 years later, I don't really write. I don't like writing songs that are simple for the sake of being simple. I just tend to like songs that are simple.
Right.
I want a good song first, and I think what we did is we were able to balance the two for a while, and then we weren't able to balance it anymore.
Right.
And then it's something got lost where there were just too many ideas that were going kind of all over the place, and like I wasn't really into it. And so that's the musical differences that I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
You know, yeah. So like, you know, and just other stupid crap of just being. I think being young is part of that too, because and like you said in an email, a lot of it's communication. You know, it just the communication was bad, but again, you know, I struggle with communication now, and it's like, right. You know, let alone being a 21-year-old kid.
Right.
You know,
well, that's the thing too, is like, you know, you have everybody in the band had a strong personality. Do you know what I mean? There was nobody docile in the band. There was no one in the band was just going along for the ride. Like everybody had an opinion, everybody had something to say. So when you did have an issue, it was you against 4, you against 3, you against 2, you know, and whatever situation. Sure. So that made the communication a little difficult because, and plus it could get heated. You know what I mean? Like when people did have an opinion, they were very staunch in their beliefs or their whatever. So it's like, you didn't even want to approach it, you know, just for the sake of argument. I think, you know, we're going back 30 years. I have a hard time remembering what I did last weekend. So,
right.
You know, I'm thinking just in terms of hindsight and like, and really, you know, James, we weren't like bands are now. Like no members lived in different state. We hung out. Like we rehearsed religiously, like almost daily.
Well, you know, Brian, I'm glad that you said that, because it's one of the things I look back and I'm really proud about, is that out of every band that I've ever been in, like the band had probably the best, I don't know if work ethic is the right word, but we rehearsed like fucking crazy. And like, I'm like one back then, I'm wondering if it's part like growing up in Little League, where I had a coach that was always like pushing, you know, and that played on my subconscious or something. Maybe. Because I felt like I wanted to do that all the time too. All right, come on, let's go. We got to do it, you know. And we would do the set twice, and then we would work on new songs. Yeah, wow. We would do the songs.
Just like
and
back to like,
I haven't been in a band since that does that. You know what I mean? And it really did pay off though, because like we sounded pretty good. And like what a lot of people, well, this is a little interesting tidbit, I guess, but on Losers of the Year, I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but that the song You and I is actually done live. I did one vocal of I did one overdub of backing vocals at the end, the hey hey hey, and Dave did one guitar track of an overdub. So everything else on that is live with me singing in the room with bleed in the mics and everything, and you just don't you don't hear that anymore.
Nope.
Like bands just don't. No bands record like that anymore, and like I always loved how that turned out, and it was live, you know. And so
And that was that solid
I don't think I've ever had that experience. I know, a matter of fact, I know I haven't had that experience with any other band. That's the one and only time I've ever had it. And so, and I thought it turned out really great. That's you know, I
didn't realize vocals were in that take as well.
Yep. Vocals were live. Everything was live. It was, like I said, with bleed in the mics and everything. And well, it just, that was the take. And so, you know, I don't know. I think that's stuff. And like something I'm really kind of proud of. I don't know if that translates to somebody that's going to pick up the CD, but maybe if you're a musician, you might like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. And
yeah, they might nerd out
one
on
of those
that.
things.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
yeah,
maybe it's an approach that worked for the Beatles.
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
right. Right.
So if you like the Beatles, you're going to love Sludgeworth. Dan, since you mentioned it, what was your position in Little League?
I played third base, second base, and left field.
So third base, you had the arm. Then you were able to get those guys
Not
out at
really.
first.
Not really. They put me there and then put me to second base.
I was a pitcher.
Oh, nice.
Were you?
Nice. So
we had a coach that would have us, you know, practice quite a bit. And I think, you know, like later on in life, I kind of look back at that time. I'm like, God, I think maybe that's where I was getting that shit from, you know?
Sure.
Like drive, you know?
And the teamwork. I mean, you talked about how you guys hung out together. I mean,
right.
That kind of, we're a gang. Like we're in this together.
It really was. And I think, you know, people ask us a lot of questions about, like, you know, typical band stuff, right? But it wasn't like that. It almost didn't even feel like a band. It just, somebody was always with somebody. Either Dave was with Strat, I was with Dan, Adam was with Dave. You know what I mean? There was always some part of the band was together somewhere at some time, and then we would all come together in my mom's basement and jam, and people would show up, and it was like a show night every night, and it was super unique. It was definitely, you'll never get that back. You'll never get that vibe back.
Yeah, it was definitely just a time in our lives, you know what I mean? Just well, it's like you said, rehearsal was really like a mini party all the time. You know what I mean?
All the time.
Here.
Yeah, I mean, especially like I remember those Friday night rehearsals. So they would even be like friends coming by, and like, you know, we're drinking and like, you know, we're just doing our set and everything, and they're kind of hanging out, and when we were done, we would just kind of drink some more, and then, you know, we kind of repeat the same thing the following week, you know.
You know, it was funny. My dad would my father would come down, right, and he was kind of like a scary dude, you know, just like in his demeanor, and everyone would kind of have that oh shit moment, and he'd be like, Brian, who didn't close the gate? Like, there's beer everywhere. There's 30 people, and my dad was upset about the fucking gate being open.
Yeah, that's some weird
I
cognitive
remember the
dissonance going
gate
on there.
thing, Brian. I want to say that your dad was pissed about that more than once, wasn't he? But the
Well,
gate,
yeah, because someone always left the gate open.
Yeah.
someone always left the gate open. He would be pissed. But that he wasn't mad about anything else. I didn't care about the. Your
No,
mom
he
was
didn't care about the
really great,
music or
by
the
the way.
beer or all the people. It was the fucking gate. Like,
It was the gate. Yeah, yeah. I totally forgot about the gate.
Amazing. So, Losers of the Year
Completely left me.
Losers of the Year was a compilation that came out after the breakup. This was a collection of stuff that Lookout put out in '95. Timing wise, you mentioned Green Day, you mentioned The Offspring. They were white hot at the time. It seemed like a great time to introduce the world at large to Sludgeworth. What was that? What was that moment all about? Were there expectations of you jumping back in, or was this just kind of like, hey, these guys are great, we should acknowledge it and move on? Was it just kind of like putting a cherry on the sundae, so to speak?
I guess, yeah. I mean, there were just everything that we had, and then we got involved with Lookout Records, and they had put it out, but yeah, yeah, it was a thing that all right, well, this is our final thing that we're doing, and had some of the tracks from the a 7-inch that we had put out, another from the LP, and then some other unreleased tracks that were on there. And this new one has even 2 more of unreleased tracks that we managed to dig up. Um, so with a video that I think this came out this morning.
Yeah, we're recording on the 6th. That just came out this morning.
Yeah,
yeah.
Back then we never intended to like play shows and everything. It was just a release of our stuff.
Yeah.
So we
talked to get it out there,
We talked about the acrimony, the breakup. You're here together. I guess this is a 2-part question. 1, do you guys like each other? 2, will there be a reunion show now that the record is out?
Who wants to answer that?
If I could punch Dan right now, I would. No, I'm kidding. I love Dan.
Yeah.
I know Dan.
You punch me, I'm going to be out for the fucking count, man.
the size of his head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look at him. He's like, it's like.
I've known Dan since I was about 13 years old. We've known each other, and I love Dan. Yeah, I'd love to do a show. It's usually Dave is usually the holdup, which he's got his weird reasons, and we're not sure exactly what they are.
Yeah, I talked to Strat too, and I kind of got a weird vibe. At the end of the day, it's funny because we've done not quite a few, but we've done a few shows. So we did the Cubby Bear, we did Riot Fest. Was it the first one?
Yeah, like 2007, I want to say.
Yeah, then we did.
Right.
Then we did Reggie's, and then we did Insubordination Fest. So we've done several shows before. And what's funny is like they've always been really good and a lot of fun. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out what the holdout is, especially with the new release and a new. I'm not going to speak on it much here. I'm going to leave it at I want to do shows in whatever capacity that has to happen. I'm down for, and I can't speak for anybody else, but trying to figure out the why to it, I'm done, kind of done with trying to figure that out, because I just get frustrated and it's like I don't get it. And if someone doesn't want to do it just because they don't want to do it or they don't see a point, that's up to them. That's their life. They don't have to.
Well, on this side of the interview, please know that we all want you to do it. If you can find a way to do it, we all want to see you do this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I get a lot of messages like this as well, and it's just something we're gonna have to try to figure out. I'm with both of them. I'd like to as well. I think it would be a lot of fun. I think the how at this point is just kind of the logistics of moving and doing it are kind of what we're facing at the moment.
Yeah, there's some moving parts that would definitely
Sure.
have to be worked out, but you know, it I don't know. I mean, it would be I would look forward to being in the same room, and it won't be my mom's basement, but and the gate will be fucking closed, but at some point it would be, you don't look, James, we're all getting older, right? It's pretty, I mean, look at Adam, you know, we're getting old. So
Yeah,
this was how Sludgeworth was. Like, we cracked on each other, and it was never a problem. Like, that's how we got along, and that's why I want to play with these guys again. Because you don't get that chance in life very often. You don't get to go back. There's
Right.
a lot of, if you look back on your life, you don't get to redo shit a whole lot. And when you get an opportunity to kind of go back in time a little bit, you should probably jump on it sooner than later. In my opinion, you know.
Agree.
Well,
I'm sure, because Dan calls me all the time talking about playing third base, in Little League, and they just won't
right.
they won't let him on the team anymore, James. So
put
Yeah.
me in, coach. Come on. I want to
Yeah,
play.
yeah.
Put me in.
put me in.
Right. There you go, man.
Has the jersey with the Vapid on the back.
Yeah.
Number 69. Yeah.
Yeah.
So losers of the
69.
year is on. I was trying to think of a punk rock number. Maybe that's not a punk
No,
rock.
that's good.
Yeah, okay.
You did
First.
great.
13 would have been a better one, probably.
13, 69,
Same thing.
666, whatever.
13
It's
would
all
be
it's
more.
all available at the alley.
Yeah, totally.
13 would have been more appropriate for losers of the year. That seems like a better numerical tie-in, which is on
Sure.
vinyl. How cool is it to have it on vinyl after all
It's
this
gonna be
time?
great.
Do you know?
It's gonna be really great.
I'm more excited. Well, I'm excited to read the liner notes, because I'm really curious.
All right, who wrote the liner notes? I mentioned Princeby at the beginning of the interview. He's in there, right?
Yeah, it's just something that Toby from Red Scare had put together, and he had a
Dillinger.
lot of people. Yeah, Patty from Dillinger Ford, Brendan from the Lawrence Arms is on there. Joe Principe's on there. Jeff Pizzotti's on there.
Oh wow.
What about the dude
Daryl from the Boll Weevils is on there, and there's a couple other people that are on there that are escaping me at the moment. But
and you haven't seen what they wrote yet?
No.
I have.
Okay.
Just did.
I have, yeah, he showed me a while ago.
Was it kind of emotional to read what your contemporaries and friends wrote?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was. There was some funny stuff in there. Patty from Dillinger Force was probably my favorite. It's like, if they were a band for like 15 more seconds, or minutes or whatever, they could have done, it's just like they broke up just a little too soon, but just, he said it in terms of like actual, like 15 minutes or something. It just, I don't know. It was very funny when I read it back.
And I think there's truth to that. Not to throw salt, but I think there's truth to that. I mean, you guys, like I said, listening back, I mean, this stuff holds up so incredibly well. You guys were lightning in a bottle.
Thanks.
Thank you.
But everything kind of works out how it's supposed to. You know what I mean?
Fair.
And I to tell you the truth, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think that if we did hang on to those 15 more minutes, I would think that some of us probably wouldn't still be here.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be like funny or anything, but I think, like, seriously, I think that there are people that were in this band that could handle maybe a higher level of whatever you want to call it, and I think there are people that wouldn't be able to handle it, and I think the people that wouldn't be here right now. And I know it sounds kind of grim and sad, but
right.
sometimes shit just works out how it's supposed to.
True enough. Well, losers of the year on vinyl for the very first time. Chicago punk pioneers. I don't think that's an exaggeration. You are Chicago punk pioneers, Sludgeworth. What a pleasure talking about your history, music. I really got. I'm excited to have had the chance to talk to you.
Thank you for having us, James.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks a lot.